Welcome back everyone to Gotcha Interact. Today we're going to be talking about the new 5-star weapons that are going to be coming alongside of Mavuika and Citlali. Now the biggest thing to keep in mind with these is that we are looking at the 5-star specific limited weapons. And yes, there are other weapons that are going to be perfectly fine for these characters as well as other 5-star weapons, but we wanted to talk about these specific weapons to really just get a gauge on how useful they will be specifically to these characters. Obviously, since they are the personal weapons, how much value would they bring, and does that mean that you guys should be going after them, or is it more or less maybe good for another character that we could think of as well? So if you guys like the video, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Now getting into it though really quickly, as you guys can probably tell, over time me and Rift have slowly switched around background scenery. So Rift has gone through probably multiple changes at this point in time. Now you just have like a black background of Doom going on in his area, and then
it's beautiful.
Exactly. And then on my end, you can probably see a little bit of a difference. All the figurines and stuff have not gone away. They've just been put on that side of the camera. And also lighting has been different as well. So that's really it. It's just a newer desk, and it's also a little bit more elevated. So now I look like my true height.
It looks really good.
My poor Zhao. Yes. Anyways, getting right into actually looking at these weapons specifically, we want to talk about a character that I know a lot of people have had a lot of controversy over, which is Mavuika and her personal weapon. So let's go ahead and talk about her personal weapon, 1,000 Blazing Suns. Now it has 741 base attack at level 90 and 11% crit rate at level 90 as well. But Rift, looking beyond the main stats, what is her refinement ability state at R1?
Well, yeah, assuming it is Refinement 1, just one copy of the weapon, it states that you will gain this Scorching Brilliance effect when using an elemental skill or burst. And that Scorching Brilliance will give you 20% crit damage and 28% attack for 6 seconds. And this effect can trigger once every 10 seconds, but it doesn't stop there. While a Scorching Brilliance instance is active, its duration is increased by 2 seconds after normal or charged attacks deal elemental damage. This effect can trigger once every second, and the max duration increase is 6 seconds. So stacking on the original 6, you can get a max duration of 12 seconds. And because it can be triggered once every 10 seconds, that means essentially this actually has no downtime. So that's very, very good. But it's still not over. Additionally, when the equipping character is in the Night Soul Blessing state, Scorching Brilliance effects are increased by 75%. That's almost double. That's crazy. And its duration will not count down when the equipping character is off field. So when you really just think about that in a nutshell, Mavuika using this weapon, she's always going to have those buffs going. You're getting a lot of crit damage, a lot of attack. And remember, those figures you're seeing there, 20% crit damage, 28% attack, it's actually 75% more. So that's 15% more crit damage. So you're actually getting 35% crit damage. And then whatever 75% of 28%, I think it's like 21.
Yep.
So add 21 to 28. And that's actually how much attack you're getting, which is like 49. It's crazy. Those are massive buffs. And the fact that you really don't have to think about your gameplay too much, these are just going to be active because they'll stay active when she's off field. You're constantly going to be doing those elemental hits with her normal and charged attacks because if you've seen our videos where we go over the kit, she does get an infusion. So like it's going to be super easy, everything adding up here, just giving her a lot of just damage stats. And I mean the high base attack weapon, you know, yes, it's a little bit lower on the crit rate, but all of this attack, she's going to be like getting close to 3,000 attack. It's going to be crazy. So Vixen, what are some of your thoughts initially on this weapon and maybe how that would affect Mavuika as like a character? Does she need this? What do you think?
Well, how I've seen it actually been played out is a little bit different, maybe, kind of on my end of how I've seen things. Specifically with the weapon, obviously, the whole point of using Mavuika is to be using your skill or your burst, whether that's on field or off field, however you are going to be using her. That's kind of the major idea. So the attack and the crit damage, no matter what, are still going to help her. And especially with the, personally for me, with this low crit rate that we see here, and the ascension that she has into crit damage, it makes me think that the 4-piece Obsidian Codex is the actual set to use for her. Now, I know for the longest time we were kind of bouncing between is Obsidian Codex better, or is the other set, Scroll the Cinder City Hero, is that set going to be better? Because if she's off-field, that set is usually better for off-field characters. What are we kind of running with here? But to see the low crit rate here, heavy emphasis on crit damage makes me think that that extra crit rate that you get from the 4-piece of Obsidian Codex is gonna mean that that's her personal 4-piece set. Rift, if you actually are just changing Night Soul, that's kind of the whole idea with the 4-piece, right?
It is the idea, and even if she's not getting the 40% from off-field, I do remember from looking at the artifact set that it lasts for 6 seconds, so she'll still have the 40% crit rate, even if it's not working from off-field and re-triggering, even though she is technically a Night Soul, like some other characters are in their Night Soul blessing state from off-field. We know that with, like, Kachina is a great example of that, but it might just be one of those things where the character has to be on-field to actually proc the artifact, kind of like with Viridescent, where if you do a Kazuha burst with Viridescent, it's not like the continual burst is refreshing as it keeps swirling. You have to be on field with the character who's, you know, triggering the swirl with the Viridescent to get it. It's not, and then if you want to refresh the duration, you have to come back on field. So if it's like that, which I think it probably is, it still is a 6-second cooldown, or duration, I should say, on that. So 6 seconds after you go off field, she still has a lot of this crit rate going for her. But even if you are doing these like main DPS teams with her, the point is still going to be that when she's on field, she's dealing a lot of damage and she's going to be critting a lot. So I think either way, I think regardless of that, which is a great point to bring up anyways, but even if it doesn't work like that, I think it's good anyways. Just like you said, I think it does point to, you know, using Obsidian Codex for the main damage dealer type thing, just because of that low crit rate. Like you said, I think just using the other set, the scroll set, would just be more like situational based on what teams you're trying to do. Maybe you're trying to just hyper buff a different character in the team, and Mavuika's just the support. Maybe like a Mualani team where you're using Mavuika instead of Xiangling, because I think that's just going to be the play from now on. That could be an instance where she's the only person on that if you for some reason aren't using Shilonen. I don't know. There could be scenarios, but I think overall I would agree with you. Obsidian Codex is probably the way to go, just seeing her being a main on-field damage dealer with a little bit of that off-field capability.
So yeah, exactly. And as I just went and checked the set as well with Obsidian Codex, yeah, it is going to be when you are on field. I thought that that's what it was going to be, but I was like, you know what, let's just make sure. But yeah, it is based on off field. So like you said, you would have to be on field to actually trigger it. But like you're talking about, since you are going off field, you still do have that 6 seconds of change of ability to kind of run with the character a little bit more. Now, overall, I think the weapon for the character is pretty solid. I think that for Mavuika, it's going to be obviously very, very good. Never mind the crit, and we talked about how great the crit ratio is in the attack. Throwing her attack, in my personal opinion, almost easily above 3,000. Either way, I feel like if you are not running her on field, this weapon loses some of its value, because you have to hit normal charge attacks to deal elemental damage to actually trigger the secondary buff on the weapon. Meaning if you are going to put her on off field and you are going to try to not do what the game's kind of telling you to do, which is put the Traveler off field and Mavuika as an on field character, if you're trying to go against that, this weapon's probably not a great idea to go for. So I just want to keep that in mind for people who are looking for that type of idea with Mavuika. But looking a little bit further at the other side, Rift, what can you tell us about the other weapon that's going to be on the banner?
So Citlali's weapon is called Starcaller's Watch, and at level 90, it's going to have a base attack of 542 and an elemental mastery main stat of 265, rivaling that of Nahida's weapon, 1,000 Floating Dreams. Now, looking at her ability, assuming just one copy of the weapon, Refinement 1, it will increase elemental mastery by a flat 100, which is really good. And then you'll also gain the Mirror of Night effect within 15 seconds after the equipping character creates a shield. The current active party member deals 28% increased damage to nearby opponents. You can gain the Mirror of Night effect every 14 seconds one time. So that's really, really good. I mean, that's really good. I don't know if you guys heard me. That's really good. Like 28% damage increase. And this is just R1. Not to mention, you're getting a flat 100 elemental mastery. And if you guys know anything about Citlali yet, she ascends into elemental mastery for her shield strength. And she is a shielder. For those of you who don't know, she's basically a cryo Zhongli, or just a 5-star version of Layla. And this weapon seems very good to just increase her sustainability for what she does in the team, on top of giving a massive damage increase to the active character, whoever that might be. So this seems like a really good pull. The only quote problem, it's not really like a problem, but it's something I would think about when you're looking at weapon banners and stuff like that, is that this weapon is very niche to Citlali. I even thought about Nahida, and I think most people do, like, that your first thought is, oh, it has a lot of EM, maybe it's good for Nahida. But the thing is, she doesn't create a shield, so the only thing you're getting out of this, if you are thinking about doing that, is 365 EM, which, yes, is actually more than her personal weapon, but Nahida's personal weapon is giving a lot of other things. It's actually giving EM to all of the other party members. It's giving her a damage bonus, which, if you guys remember, Nahida actually has really good damage too, so you don't want to completely neglect that. But I think if you don't have Nahida's weapon and you want your Nahida to be better, sure, why not? But just stick with the Widsith, dude. Like, it's got crit damage in the main stat. She can crit, and it can give you the EM and more of it at just R1. So my point is, the weapon's very niche to Citlali. I think if you are planning on getting Citlali, this weapon does have a lot of value, and because of that, the weapon banner overall, I would say, has a lot of value. But Vixen, I want to know some of your thoughts on this weapon, but also on Citlali specifically, and then like the overall value of the banner.
Yeah, I think overall, specifically, I guess just actually looking at Citlali like you were talking about, Citlali I think is going to have a lot of good ability, and obviously with this weapon being paired with her, you know, we've seen a lot with Cryo kind of being thrown back into the Dark Ages with just not being that great of an element anymore, and I think this doesn't necessarily put Cryo back on the map, but it does allow a Cryo character like Citlali to actually bring forward Cryo back into teams. Maybe not the main damage dealer, and maybe not, you know, its former glory, if you will, with Ganyu and Ayaka, but I do think that having this huge active party member damage buff alongside of the great shield that she's going to get, I do think it's going to bring some pretty nice, interesting things to her. Never mind, her actual crit is also going to be able to have a resistance shred of Pyro and Hydro. When it comes into contact, I think makes a reaction or something like that with her. Mm-hmm. So overall, I think Citlali brings a lot to the team. The weapon, when it talks about, I guess, bringing what it actually brings to her, like you said, the high amount of EM, obviously extremely good. She has a cooldown on her skill of 16 seconds. This has a 15-second duration, so you only have a 1-second downtime between the buff that you get and that. So maybe after the skill is done or something like that, maybe you might want to wait so that but this can trigger every 14 seconds. So by the time you use your skill again and are able to trigger this, you have a 16 seconds until you can trigger the skill again, which means both of these buffs are going to be readily available because the 14 and 15 seconds are lower than the 16 from her skill. So either way, you're making out like a bandit, in my opinion, with this weapon and with her actual kit. So no matter what, it is funny because the numbers aren't the same, but it's not the same in a good way because of the cooldown of her skill being longer than these buffs. So obviously, it's her personal weapon, it's going to be the best. Like you said though, this is a stat stick, so if you accidentally get it for, you know, you're going after Mawika's weapon and you accidentally drop this weapon, yeah, you could throw it on your Nahida, if you just accidentally have it, sure. Like you said, Widsith is another good option, though, to kind of keep in mind. But if you're not really a fan of that whole, like, do I get attack percent? Do I get elemental damage bonus? Do I get EM? It kind of, you know, is a toss-up. And, you know, the cooldown's too long for me as well. This weapon wouldn't be terrible. You know, it's still a 5-star weapon, and it does give a bunch of EM. Now, the shield is kind of practically useless, but, you know, I guess that's just kind of the thing you have to go with. There is another character, Lanyan, who's going to be a Catalyst user that does that could kind of maybe try to use it to maybe some swirl damage or something. But once again, like you were talking about Rift, as soon as you get outside of Citlali, the Catalyst users are usually just like, I don't want this weapon. Like, they're just done. So
yeah, basically.
I don't feel like any actual character would like to use the weapon besides Citlali, but that's just me. But besides that, overall, looking at the banner itself, I think Mawika's weapon and Citlali's weapon have a lot of good use for them. If you don't have them, or if you're not trying to play them in a specific way, the value of the weapons do drop. So if you're not going to run Mawika on field, her weapon kind of goes out the window. And if that's the case and you're not getting Citlali, going for the weapon banner is a very risky choice. But if you are, like me, going after both Mawika and Citlali, this is kind of a perfect duo. 2 brand new characters, 2 amazing weapons for the 2 brand new characters. I think there's a lot to really gain from here as well. Never mind, honestly, Mawika's weapon, actually, if we go back, all you really need to do is a skill or a burst, which a lot of characters want to use their skill and burst to do damage. So you could find another character that wants to do their skill, wants to do their burst, and get a lot of damage out of this. I mean, someone like Navia. Can you imagine an 11% crit rate with the 741 right. And then just stack a bunch of crit rate, but then just get like, you know, the 35% crit damage plus the 49% attack? Like, the amount of buff that you could get her is
and it's
insane.
like really easy too. You don't have to like, okay, I gotta think about like how I'm doing my rotation. Like, it's super easy to just build up. You just do some skills. Like, and Navi uses a lot of skills. You use the burst pretty much on cooldown from offfield. You know, just everything's going off at the same time. I even thought of D-Luke, because D-Luke uses a lot of skills.
That's
it kind of matches him a little bit with the red, so that just kind of came to my mind. But like, there's so many characters actually, so many Claymore, just typical damage dealers that could really get along with this weapon really well. So,
I mean, yeah, with Navi, you're popping the burst immediately. Same thing with D-Luke, because then they both go into some sort of normal attack combo. D-Luke kind of the normal skill, normal skill. Navia's popping her burst immediately and then switching over and using her skills to then use her normal attacks because of the infusion. So yeah, I mean, there's just, I think that weapon in and of itself almost carries the banner, just because it's actually not a bad banner. So if you're going for Citlali and you're like, I hate Mawika, I don't want to pull her, she's trash, she's garbage, but you accidentally get her weapon because you're going for Citlali's weapon, it's not that bad. Yeah, and we're gonna bring up the bike again. Oh my goodness. but yeah, like I just think that this weapon is really, really good, and I think there's a lot of positivity that can come from the weapon, at least. Usually with the Archon weapons, we tend to see them being extremely specific to the character, but I'm almost kind of glad this weapon has a little bit of like play outside just her.
Definitely seems very flexible. And I also like what you said, kind of going back to what you said about Citlali's weapon and just how Citlali as a character kind of coming back. Like, I think the way you said it was, it's not like bringing Cryo back to a point where it's like really good. Now, this isn't to say that, you know, Ganyu and Ayaka can't clear content, because they still can, and Wriothesley can clear content too. But most people would agree that there's just more powerful options. Remember, just because it's not the most powerful doesn't mean it can't clear the content, okay? It just means that there's simply a higher tier that just does more damage. That's it. That's all it means. But with Citlali, I think as far as like usage rates go in the Abyss, you're gonna probably see more Citlali usage just as an average, most likely. This is just my guess, you could say, than characters like Ayaka, Ganyu, Wriothesley, maybe even Shenna, just because her type of support, especially if she has her weapon, is very universal. You're just giving your active character so much more damage. So I feel like a lot of people are going to be using that regardless of what team it may be. That's going to be good for Chaska. It's going to be good for Mavuika. Could be good for Mualani, maybe. Who knows?
Throw it in for
she
Wanderer.
Seems like a pretty solid character.
I mean,
yeah, I mean, really, you could go like anything. Like, any main DPS is getting this damage increase, and Citlali's this sustain in the team. You can run the other two characters as other supports or damage dealers. You can be pretty offensive because of it.
Have we really had another shielder since Zhongli as a 5-star that has put up the amount of sustain as she has? Has there actually been a 5-star shielder?
Maybe
since?
Baiju?
But we're not gonna. I'm about to say. I was gonna say Baiju.
Technically speak, like if someone's gonna be in the comments, you know, being like, but what about Baiju? Like, I remember when we made our original video on Baiju, and I said, guys, I think this is like the first time we've ever seen a healer and a shielder in the same character, and everyone in the comments, Noelle, excuse me, Diona. And I'm like, okay, guys, come on, you get the point. Like, 5 stars, okay? It was just like so funny, but
I think the same thing here.
Unless we are forgetting, it's just Baiju, right?
Yeah, I think that was the most recent.
Guys, spare us in the comments, please.
Yeah,
have some mercy.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, comments are never merciful, but I think overall, when you look at it, we haven't had someone as a 5-star at least that we can think of right now, that is a shielder. Never mind someone even as a 4-star that can put up the shielding capabilities that Zhongli does. Now, I'm not going to say that she's going to put out Zhongli. She might. I might be wrong. But I feel like her cryo is going to bring a lot more to certain teams as well. Whether that be reactions, whether that be like with Wanderer, the whole with him, he gets a certain buffs based off of it. Like you said, Chaska, she uses cryo as damage now instead of Geo, where she just gets the Animo back, which she doesn't really want to do. Like Wanderer, once again, he gets that crit rate based on his buff or whatnot. There is just too much that I think that she can do. Now, I'm not saying that she's going to do more than Zhongli, because I know people are going to be like, actually, Zhongli gives a resistance shred. Actually, Zhongli does this. And I'm like, okay, I get it. But can we just be a little bit happy that somebody else is going to be here as well? I know everybody talks about Bennett and Xiangling for Circle Impact, but nobody ever talks about Zhongli. And I feel like we're finally getting someone who can be in the way of being a pretty good shielder instead of just always using and thinking about Zhongli.
Yeah, and looking back, for dedicated shielders, if you want to count Baizhu, he's the only one. If you don't want to count Baizhu, then it's been since Zhongli in terms of 5-star shielders. Like, that's what they do. If you don't count Baizhu, if you do, you can, whatever. Every other character is not a shielder, so there you go.
I mean, hey, I'm just saying, you heard it here first. But either way, I think that's everything we've got to say about these characters, about the weapons. We know we've talked about them in other things, and we'll probably go over into it a little bit later as well in other videos, talking about Mavuika and Citlali as well. But if you guys did like the video, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Let us know any of your thoughts on these weapons. If you guys are thinking about pulling them based on what you guys actually have and what you're going to use the characters for, go ahead and let us know. Let us know if you guys are going to be kind of like, you know, some of those other weapons where you might try to put it on someone else. Let us know. Well, thank you again for watching the video, though, and we'll see you guys in the next one.